Hey guys, Thomas the Jr. here, aka Mustached Tom, here to review the movie 65. If you end up enjoying this full movie review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my the first one will head you over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers. Second and third to my Patreon and PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel directly. And fourth to my Discord server, where you can join, collab, and chill your own content for free. And showing will be reminded at the end of the review. With all that out of the way, let's get into the movie 65. So I saw the trailer for this about a few times. I want to say 2 or 3 times. And honestly, I didn't know quite what to think of this movie from its trailer. It seemed like suddenly these characters were dealing with dinosaurs, and I was like, I mean, okay. I appreciate a good dinosaur movie, every now and again. So, I was like, okay. And I actually didn't know this initially. It clearly says this from above, made from the people who made A Quiet Place. Now, when I put that in my head and I think of this movie, I can definitely see why. I can definitely see the thread between A Quiet Place and this one. And I do think that the easiest criticism one can make of both of these movies is that they clearly both prioritize the sort of the unique threat or the different threat over the characters. In A Quiet Place, it was those unique creatures that were very much sound-based. And, you know, at least on initial viewing for me, A Quiet Place was quite unique in that regard, and then a lot of people started coming along and started picking up that apart about, like, how much the whole sound thing wasn't as fully thought through as conceivably possible. But I would still say it was an enjoyable movie outside of the obvious criticisms you can make of it. I can't say how much I remember of even which should tell you a lot. I don't remember a lot of The Quiet Place Part 2, even though that came out more recently, so it's probably less memorable than the first one, if anything. So I probably would say that the second one's probably even worse? Question mark? I don't know. Anyway, so it's very clear that the individuals who created it, again, A Quiet Place, were very much trying to, think of ways that sound can play a part. And there are definitely parts of that movie that I would still acknowledge do take advantage of that concept, but other parts, obviously, people have pointed to be like, whether it's, trying to dumb down the family, or through other means of trying to point out where things could have been built up a little bit better. Things of that nature from what I can remember of the reviews of A Quiet Place. But I was still willing, even after the fact of learning that this is from A Quiet Place, to be like, okay, so what's the deal with 65? All I know about this one is that it deals with dinosaurs for some reason. So let's get into it, and I will review it as objectively as possible. So I will no longer be bringing up A Quiet Place into the equation, because again, I'm trying to think of this movie as an independent movie from that movie. But I did mention, though, that I could see why others would critique this particular movie for this, again, for that similar reason of the characters not being, or the sort of prioritizing, the sort of idea of the whole dinosaur thing over the characters. Which, I could see some people coming to that conclusion. Anyway, semantics aside, let's get into the actual plot of the movie. Now, the movie starts off with a bit of a text crawl, a short one at that, but I honestly don't think either of these text crawls, based off the rest of the movie, are actually even necessary. But I will read out what I wrote here. What it says is, prior to the advent of mankind, in the infinity of space, other citizens explored the heavens. As we cut from this sort of wide sky shot to a couple at the beach, we're starting with Adam Driver's character. I believe he refers to himself at some point as Mills. And we quickly see that the daughter is sick. So he's trying to show her this quite unique whistle, or sound, with that sort of trick of like clasping your hands together and sort of blowing into it in a way that makes a specific sort of slight noise. I'm not a professional whistler by any sorts. I can't even do the other whistle of like the two fingers in the mouth one, so I'm not going to attempt to do either of those. So that's essentially what she's being taught to do, and she manages to get it, guides her through it, and she knows that he's getting prepped to leave. And she sort of says, "You're leaving because of me," and he corrects her in saying, "I'm not leaving because of you, I'm leaving for you." So, correcting the semantics of her wording, essentially. So, apparently, he works at some sort of ship where he's like the sole person on, well, he's not the sole person on the ship, there are other people on the ship, but he's the one that is active while everyone else is sort of at this sort of cryostasis. So he's the one manual person to look over the ship as they're sort of heading outwards towards wherever their destination was supposed to be, because I don't think we actually ever learned where they were trying to get to. Because our little ship detour, wherever it was meant to go, is instead hit by a meteor shower. We see that the several pods are just like shot out, and his ship is absolutely just pelted with these rocks, and he manages obviously to survive, being our leading character, through a crash landing on a planet that is just So a small shard gets into him, so he manages to pull it out, and he stumbles on out, and he sees that all the chambers have currently failed to open or are just all gone, so he just assumes that he's the sole survivor of this plane crash. We see a little hint of a sea creature. It doesn't really affect anything, it's just like, I guess, trying to build some sort of tension about, like, this is what lurks in on this planet, is sort of like what they're trying to build here, essentially, is what I'm guessing. Anyways, he heads back to the ship. Again, seeing that there are definitely more dead crew members. So he initially makes a message and calls out for help, but thinks it over, and he's like, man, do I really have anything left to live for? But as we cut away from that, he is also showing that he has learned that on this planet it is a breathable planet, and despite that, though, he's still ready to send himself off into the death with a gun pointed to himself, but he thinks of his daughter and is unable to kill himself. So, he doesn't send a message that says that he is alive currently. He's like, no, no one's alive. And he's like listening to one of the several messages from his daughter. He's like compiled a list of them on his ship. However, the ship locates a pod that, while not active, seems to have, again, just be sort of stable, I guess is the best way of putting this. But it's in the far distance, so he's like, might as well check it out. So he does so, and he pulls out the young girl on the left side of the poster. But in the process of moving her, we see him spot a giant footprint. And then a weird second text crawl appears and points out that it says 65 million years ago a person came to Earth is what they call this. Again, I don't think either of these text crawls are necessary for this movie to work, by the by. So, I don't know. Again, I'm not sure why they were even in the movie. We see that she awakens, but isn't really sure what's going on. All the while, he's looking outside on the top of the ship, and he's following along and finds these large pile of bones. And a geyser goes off. So the planet has its own set of hazards and things of that nature. So the planet itself is very clearly distinct in that sense as well. But he manages to have this device on him throughout the movie that's able to clock distances, essentially, find basic routes, essentially. It's sort of like a mini-map in a way. So, I could see how this could become a video game very easily, though, technically speaking, that would probably be very close to Dino Crisis, which is a video game thing with dinosaurs. And one that a lot of people are now clamming for, and I would imagine after a movie like this, a lot more people are going to be clamming for Dino Crisis, especially with the advent of the release of Resident Evil 4 Remake coming out relatively soon-ish. Anyway, as he uses his mini-map device to check the distances, we see a group of, I'm assuming these are like mini raptors. They are like small raptors, which apparently, I think this is accurate. I think these are more to the size of what raptors would have been, according to fossils anyway, I think. For those who don't know what I'm referring to, this is a reference to the Jurassic Park velociraptors, because the velociraptors in that were relatively taller, I think, and they were made relatively a little bit taller for the sake of, like, they're, like, slightly hinged taller than humans by, like, a hair or so. But apparently, that's not as accurate. And again, there might have even been raptor variants, like the bird one is one that is often also something that is also apparently might be true. But nonetheless, he proceeds to kill it relatively quickly. He sees that the girl has sort of caught up to him and runs off from him. But they both tumble something into something that is very clearly dead. So he brings her back and finds out her name is Kia, or I wrote in my notes Kara, because that's what I thought he was saying throughout the movie. So I'm just going to call her Kara for simplicity's sake, because I'm not sure how to pronounce her exact name. It's like Kia or something like that, but I'm not exactly sure. So again, for my own sake, I'm just going to call her Kara. For, again, simplicity's sake. So that's not her actual character name, if anyone's curious. And again, he refers to himself as Mills. So he begins treating his the injury that he sustained, and notices that she has a burn mark on her arm. So he begins to treat her too. So she clearly speaks some sort of different language. So he's trying to find a way to communicate with her, and begins to use a more universal language of art, or simple art at that very most, as he draws a mountain and shows them sort of snaking their way up the mountain. And she shows that she's desperately looking for her family. He denotes that she is around the age of 9. And now with her in the picture, he signals out for help officially, because now he has someone to look out for. So we see, as they arrive back on the ship, she's sort of looking over these clips of the daughter, and as they get ready to move back out, he tells her to move quickly and calmly, and makes gestures, and it's very clear that she's able to pick up what he's putting down relatively quickly, despite their language barrier. So she's quite the smart cookie here, or is able to absorb information relatively quickly anyway, which is, very, I would say is pretty apt and accurate, probably. So they have quite a distance a ways to go. So she grabs some berries and almost gets ready to eat. But as they are sort of traveling, based off of the cut, they've probably been traveling for a while, since their distance was like 12 kilometers, which I'm assuming is like really far, based off of wherever they are currently. Anyway, so she's a little bit bored, or at least trying to gain his attention. So she's like tossing some of the berries at him, and she manages to successfully throw 2 at him, and then he catches the 3rd. So he's able to use a separate device, which is like a scanner, to show if the food is edible or not, and he warns her that it's not, and again, she just mimics him pretty aptly. He feels a bug on his neck and quickly slaps it, and when he smears the bug on like this tree bark, and he sees the mess on his hands, he says the word shit, and obviously she mimics the word shit. So she's mimicking everything he's saying quite shortly after he says it. And we see him pull out a very quick fatherly sort of attitude towards her. Just as they're traveling, and she's kind of losing the enjoyment or whatever. So he's like messing around with her as she's sort of, but once a tree falls, and they're around to literally see and hear it, he immediately gets in front of her and gets that gun out, that rather unique gun. And they quickly pull out of that situation. So they fall back and have a little food along the way. But we see the comparison of compies, which are the small, super small dinosaurs. At least that's, I think, where they're. Again, I always jump back to Jurassic Park because I think that's like the easiest movie of anyone who's ever seen a dinosaur movie to compare to like, that's the dinosaur I'm referring to, the compy, which is again the small ones that are they seem harmless when they're alone, but boy oh boy, when they travel in their little packs is when they start to get in the later movies. They show that even the little compies can be very dangerous. So he's rechecking his injury, making sure that he's able to sustain himself. And again, she's continuously copying him, and when he says he is tired, she simultaneously says she is tired, because, again, she's mimicking what he's saying. He proceeds to guide her to water, and again, just really simple stuff. So, now that they're once again in a more calm space, she pulls on a flower and puts it on, and eventually she's like guiding it towards him, and eventually we cut to him just having it on. So again, kind of putting on that sort of fatherly, like, yeah, I'll let you do the thing. And he begins to climb a massive tree, but to let his little map thing like scope out like ahead, but he's on a short like set of like tree stumps or the outgrowing parts of the tree, and a bug lands on him, or something rather lands on him, so much so that he falls, and clearly hurts his arm in the process of his particular fall, so he's trying to readjust it as more of these bizarre lizard-looking creatures. Now, these are something that are not in Jurassic Park. These are something completely different that are on all fours. So, in my notes, I just called them giant lizard creature things, because that's kind of what they look like, but big. So they encroach. So he uses his grenade, his gun. He uses these ball grenade things that he has. So he's very quickly showing how competent he is, even despite his injury, as he's able to ward them all off with his gun and grenade ball things. However, she was separated from him to quite a degree, and she ends up tumbling into, or running towards these group of pterodactyls. So she's trying to hide from them, while also simultaneously trying to hide from the lizard-like creatures, and he arrives to save her from the lizard-like creatures that are also catching up to her simultaneously. So he saves her here, but from these two lizard-like creatures, however, she's pulled away by a third creature, and he proceeds to shoot it down, or shoot at it, or towards the air as it runs off into the distance, I should say, rather. So, at this point, she is very clearly terrified or scared, as she's just like curled up in a ball. So, he does the whistle thing that we saw him do at the beginning with his own daughter to her, trying to calm her down. And she does the finger whistle at him to show that she actually knows how to do a different type of whistle, which is interesting, I suppose. So they move a little bit away from their current location, obviously, and they find what they think is a discreet spot where he sets up these like little lights that like probe up around them with light every so often, and they try to get some sleep as the night falls upon them. However, as he's looking up towards the sky, he's pointing his little device at it, and he's growing quite curious, and the device is telling him that it can't quite detect what this is, that it is just there, and it's seemingly something. So, during this, she proceeds to show him the picture of the daughter. She, took the picture at a point and gives it back to him. And this clearly gets him a little bit upset, but not to an extreme degree, but we do see that his hands are shaking. However, he composes himself, but the tension rises as these lights that were shining yellow now begin to shine red and create a new sound showing or indicating that there's some new threat getting ready to pounce. So he wakes up because there's a cutaway where they both are asleep, and that's when the yellow lights turn red. Just so I'm making sure that's clear. And the girl ends up getting this weird bug thing in her mouth, and he again saves her again by using the light to draw the creature out and then kill it, and make sure it's pulled out safely. So it's the third time he saves her, showing again how competent he is at this point. But he's still injured throughout the movie. But the lights are still tensing up even further, as deeper into the cave they hear a noise, and no surprise, you see the cave on the poster here. It's none other than our resident T-Rex. And they sort of veer around the T-Rex and end up back in the cave and try to draw on a different path, using the little device to try to essentially find a different way out. So she draws as they're in this cave, she once again draws the family symbol of the two stick figures together, and she's reinforcing this is what I want at this point. And he keeps ensuring her that yeah, I'll get you there. And we see that she's getting really desperate as she's just saying all of these things, some of which we can't understand, some of them we can, and he's sort of getting a headache from it a little bit. So he just blurts out the truth quickly, so we're not really sure whether or not she understands this particular part. I'm gonna guess no, though. So he kind of gives up, and she's the one who's now persistent on finding a path, or carving out a path. And through all of that stress and, just dealing with as much as he has, he remembers that he still has some of those grenade ball thingies with him. So he pulls some of those out again, and uses one of them to create a cave space. So she's ahead of him while they're crawling through the cave space. However, they get separated enough and the cave caves in. So she ends up outside, and she was given the rest of the grenades, by the way. And so he has to go back. And all the while he gets bumped into, so he has to take out his gun. And his gun even gets tackled from him as these smaller, bizarre creatures are sort of whispering around him currently. So he has this other device. He has a lot of technology to compensate that makes this noise and is able to get himself out of that scenario. All the while, we see the girl find a bone shard. This is the best way I can describe this, and take the bad berries, as she's been told that they were bad explicitly, and she remembers this, so she smears the bad berries on the shard and covers it in a leaf, so that the badness of the berries, what's inside of it, can seep into this weapon that she's now made. So this is a setup for something later in the movie, obviously. Anyway, he manages to get outside the cave, but he's also obviously quite a bit of ways away now at this point from her. And he learns, as he points the device back up to the thing that he was seeing before, that the device now is able to detect what it is, and it's the asteroids that hit his ship are a huge chunk of them are going towards this planet, and that this collision will be inevitable. It will happen. So now there is a time clock on how long they are able to be on this specific planet. So he's rushing to try to get to her, but he ends up in quicksand, unfortunately, which is what he couldn't tell because it was surrounded by several leaves. So he's calling out and yelling out to her. As we cut back to her, and she's fleeing from this raptor. She closes it off, and she uses one of the grenades to make sure it's dead. So she's quite competent in her own right at this point in the movie, as we are now seeing. And she hears him, so they're not too far off from one another. So she's running towards him. We see him just get to the sinking point, and just as he does, she arrives, blowing one of the branches towards him, which he is able to grab onto, and now it is the first time that she is saving him. So now she is finally returning of a favor after the 3 save attempts. Now she is saving him. And he hugs her for this, but proceeds to warn her that they're running out of time to the best of his ability, so they begin to move. He uses a rope to guide her up this mountainous path, and she proceeds to, again, show how quickly she can catch on to things as she's being told, throws down the rope, and so he's able to climb up. So they get to the ship, and he sees that it is working, and she's desperately looking around because she knows that her family must be here of all places. And he learns that their call went out successfully, I think. But at least that's what the device is telling him anyway. So she's managed to make her way outside, and she's just begging for her family once again, and she begins to, when he pulls out the picture that she gave to him and shows the daughter, he mentions how she died, and it's very clear the dynamic that has now been cemented in this one scene, and they hug again, sort of building a family unit at this point in the movie. They never even say it, but I don't think this movie has to say the very obvious dialogue. So, in a weird way, perhaps this comparison is apt based on what's going to be a review coming out relatively soon. This has a very Joel and Ellie vibe to it. So yeah, that's neat. So the ship begins to tumble its way down, because of their positioning wasn't great, where the ship even was. It was kind of mudslide, so it slid down. And unfortunately for them, the T-Rex returns. And boy oh boy, are they just out of luck, as his gun is just out of the charge, or it's locked, or something, or one of those two, as another T-Rex shows up. So now there's two T-Rexes, and he's off on the distance, and she's still on the ship. But she plays a video of the daughter to distract the two T-Rexes that are distracted by the light that's emitting, and they're like, what is this source of whatever this is? Which allows him the opportunity, so this is another she saves him moment, so now it's 2 for 3. And he goes on the attack and is able to get them. However, just when he thinks he's out of the woods, he's out of ammo, he's killed 2 T-Rexes with his one gun, so this is a powerful fucking gun, obviously. But a new monster enters the arena, and it's not quite a T-Rex, it's like a giant lizard T-Rex mix creature. This is the best way I can describe this one. And chases him. So he runs towards where the geyser is and passes it. However, we see from behind, and I'm guessing that she got herself out or was working. We saw her working towards getting out. Now she's out. We see her charge with that weapon that we saw her craft earlier in the movie. That shard with the sickening berries in it. And jab it into this creature, directly into the eye socket, now saving him for the 3rd time, making their saves even. They have saved each other 3 for 3, so they are on even footing by the end of the movie. And so they head back to the ship. Now that they have taken care of the forces that are nearby, and he is able to successfully get the ship back up and running, and gets the ship up in the air, as the meteors that are clearly heading towards this planet are heading down, and they are able to successfully get away, as the two simply, without even saying much of anything, hold hands to indicate that they are indeed a new-found family. And that was the movie 65. And, I think this movie is actually pretty good. I think it's pretty obvious that there's very clear CGI and stuff of that nature in this movie. But my channel, and when I look at objective reviewing on my channel, I've maintained the focus on writing and the story progression over how a movie looks. I mean, unless it's demonstrably ugly, then I'll at least point it out, if that is the case. Which, I don't think current movies, with maybe a few exceptions here and there, typically tend to do. But I think this movie's work here is, in terms of that regard, is fine. And again, I do think that the premise here is obviously held in the higher regard of the two elements. I mean, the characters are quite simplistic here. He's a father trying to do a job. That's it. And he's trying to do it for his daughter at the time, but, by the time he already gets there, things clearly change. And, the mission to protect this younger girl, who he clearly becomes a very clear father figure for by the end of the movie, is quite an enduring story. And I obviously mentioned The Last of Us because it's very reminiscent of that story. This is a man that clearly lost something, and clearly lost a lot more on his way towards this planet. And again, it's kept relatively simple. and despite her not being able to initially understand him, they keep the communication relatively simple, whether it's her mimicking him or him being able to tell her, like, this is where we're going, and her being able to understand that to the basic degree. So yeah, I think this movie is actually a lot more straightforward than A Quiet Place. I don't think that there's anything, again, too wild other than this whole idea of, like, these humans were, like, here 65 million years ago, and they landed on Earth when the dinosaurs were here on a futuristic-looking ship. Yeah, that's, like, the hardest part of the buy, obviously. So, again, I think that the dialogue was completely unnecessary for the movie. I think that should have obviously been what should have been cut away from the movie. I mean, outside of that, though, I'm really struggling to see issues, and I think I've seen certain reviewers' thumbnails. I haven't seen any of their reviews of, like, them having this sort of like, sort of look to them. And again, I can kind of see what that means, I think. Again, it's a relatively simple story when you bear it all out and you really actually think about it. But again, I never think that's an issue to create a simple story. I think that some of the best movies or stories can be simple stories a lot of the time. Complexity obviously takes a different type of work, different types of craftsman type work, a different type of an eye out for that type of complexity in it of itself, and to make all of that complexity feel good as well. It's a different beast, obviously. But, again, I think that the premise here is pretty straightforward. What if two humans ended up on we'll just say for the sake of this, a planet that is Earth-like, but with dinosaurs on it, and is gonna follow the events that lead up to the dinosaurs dying off, and they have until that specific point to get off of this specific planet. And yeah, I think that's a way more straightforward premise, and I think it lends itself to less issues than A Quiet Place did, because again, its premise was a lot based off of sound, and that I think that the problem with that is that sound has a lot of interesting possibilities to it, but it also comes with its own hindrances, as a lot of people have been able to point out along the way. With a premise like this, you're just like, so they're just on a planet with dinosaurs, and he has a lot of futuristic gadgets, that's all we know. That's what we're set up with, is that's what he was given. And for the sake of that, yeah, it's pretty much sticks with that. Well, I mean, dinosaurs and creatures that are just, I don't know what dinosaurs they are specifically, so again, I shrug at those specific creatures, but, but it's pretty quite clear that most of them are supposed to be dinosaurs anyway, so I think it's still kept pretty straightforward regardless. So I think I enjoyed this movie. I think its relatively simpleness is worthy of a 7 out of 10. I think this is a solid movie. And I mean, I think if I could find a few more issues along here and there, I could find myself probably landing on a 6, but for now I'll land on that solid 7 out of 10. And that's my review of 65. And if you ended up enjoying this full review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers. Second and third to my Patreon and PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel. And fourth to my Discord server, where we can chill and collab your own content. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.